Hello, good evening, happy Tuesday. I'm Allison, and I'm coming to you live from Live with Gotham Quilts. It is. I'm so excited to bring today's show to you. You might have gathered from either the title or the description, or maybe our email to remind you to watch the live show, that I actually just got back from a trip to Paducah, Kentucky, which is known as the quilting capital of the United States, if not the world. I'm not sure, but I feel comfortable saying the United States. And so this trip was fantastic, and I took lots of pictures where it counted, and not a lot of pictures where maybe it didn't count so much. So, uh, really excited to bring to you the information about the quilts that I saw. And I think you're going to like this, whether you are planning a trip to Paducah or whether it's not a trip you're going to be able to make anytime in the near future. I hope that this will be helpful for you. Now, one of the things to mention, actually, let's start by talking a little bit about the National Quilt Museum. So, the National Quilt Museum was founded in 1991 by Bill and Meredith Schroeder. It's in Paducah, Kentucky, which is just below Illinois. So, they're right below the Ohio River there. So, it's just on, I guess we'll call it just on the right side of Kentucky. It is the only museum in the country dedicated to contemporary quilts and quilt makers. And I say contemporary because I want to distinguish that from either strictly traditional or strictly modern quilts. Contemporary is kind of, I think, a best combination of both. And I think you're going to see that when we get into the slides for the trip. It has a rotating collection of over 600 quilts, and USA Today has called it one of the best quilt displays in the world, and I am very tempted to agree with that. Now, how I'm kind of going about this is I didn't necessarily want to take pictures of all the quilts, although I might have. I might have. I didn't necessarily need to show you pictures of all of the quilts in the event that you want to visit it for yourself. Now, the lovely thing about the National Quilt Museum is there are rotating displays. There are a number of what we'll call it permanent displays, ones that you can see year round at the National Quilt Museum. But then they also feature different topics, or in this case, a couple of different designers. We've got three different designers or quilt makers that are featured in the museum. And those displays get rotated out. And I'll be sure to tell you how long each of these are going to be at the National Quilt Museum. But it could be that when you visit, you might see some of these, you might see something completely different. So it is definitely a trip that would be amazing to take more than once as those displays are cycled in and out. And I do want to say a special hello to Barbara from Southern California. I'm sure it's Southern California. Of course, you're having wonderful weather, but I hope you're doing very well. And we've got South Island, New Zealand. Hello, Molly. Welcome to the show. Really great to have you here. We always love to hear where you are watching from. And we've got Kathy on Facebook, could not get YouTube to work. So just a reminder, if you ever want to watch us, we always have the replays on YouTube. And so if you miss us or if you can't get connected, we're on Facebook and then also YouTube where you can watch the replay. So hello to all of you. Welcome. Okay, now to the fun stuff. Here's what I did. To show an amazing amount of restraint here. Let's see if I can make my face go away there. To show an amazing amount of restraint here of the over 600 quilts that were on display, I am bringing you 7 quilts today. And these quilts that are ones that stopped me in my tracks, that I kept going back to look at, that I found unique or interesting in one way or the other. And this is just my personal opinion. Reasonable people could pick any one of these quilts that were on display and put it in their top 7 list. But as I was preparing, I could not stop at just 7. So you are going to see a few extras, a few bonus quilts, because what quilter ever follows the rules, right? Not this one. Definitely not this one. So these first ones are going to be in the general quilts on display. So this area features a number of different artists, of designers, of quilters, and they run the gamut from they all lean a little bit modern, I would say, but some of them are considered traditional, some of them are super modern, and you'll want to stay till the end because I've got two quilts that in the bonus section that were very hotly debated. So I'd love to get your take on these ones. But those were the ones that I heard most talked about, both good and bad. So here are the general ones. This first quilt is called Big Bang by Gail Gerber, and it was finished, we'll say, in 1997. What is fabulous about this one is, and I'm going to say this with love and respect, is the age. This is one of the older quilts in this collection. I think the oldest that I saw across the whole museum was from the 80s, 88, 89, somewhere around there. And so when you look at some of the quilts that are kind of come later, 1997 is relatively old for a quilt. But this is Big Bang. This is where Gail Gerber developed the style that she is now known for. So I think it really is a very pivotal piece, a very beautiful quilt. And if you think back in like the 90s, 97, there weren't the resources that there are now. And so I think it's kind of unique and creative. I'm going to give you a closer look at this quilt and especially those curved flying geese going around some of the circular pieces here and just how beautiful the quilting is. I think that's going to be a pretty consistent message throughout all of this is, boy, the quilting. There's some really beautiful quilting in here. So this is Big Bang. This is one of the quilts that I just kept looking at and looking at. Here is another one, and this is a quilt called Stellar. And I'm going to move my head out of the way here for a second. This is by Antari Foster. She is a quilter out of the UK, and this was finished in 2025. And you might say, that is lovely. This was made with a combination of foundation paper piecing, applique, and reverse applique. If you're not familiar with reverse applique, it's basically where you are sewing fabric into other fabric and then cutting away, as opposed to applique, which is sitting on top. Now, what is even more impressive, I would say maybe the most impressive about this particular quilt, is that this quilt is 12 inches. It's about 12 inches wide and about 12 inches tall. So all of this beautiful design work, this beautiful quilting, foundation paper piecing, applique, it all fits within a foot by foot, roughly. And you can imagine how small, itty bitty, tiny, tiny some of those pieces are, having a quilt that is no more than a little over a foot wide. Could not believe it. Could not get close enough to actually like dissect this. Was it applique? Were some of those, like the Mariner's Compass, for example, was some of that? What if this was applique? What is foundation paper pieced? How do all these pieces go together? I could not get my eyeballs close enough to that. So this is going to be tip number one to you. If you are going to the Quilt Museum, you don't think you need it, but bring your reading glasses or a magnifying glass or something, because there is some really impressive, beautiful, detailed work going on there. Now, those were the main general section, and there were probably 20 or 25 other quilts that I could have picked. The main display here is 20 years of Tula Pink. So on display at the National Quilt Museum. This started April 3rd, so it's been going on for a little while, and this ends September 15th of 2026. So if you are going to the National Quilt Museum, if you're looking for Tula, make sure you go before September 15th, because at that time, this particular display, this installment will move on, and the quilts will go back to their home. So many of you already know Tula Pink. She is a fabric designer, an illustrator, and an author who has spent 20 years, 2 decades, turning more is more into an actual design philosophy. And I think when you see some of these quilts, if you're not familiar with Tula before now, I think you're going to agree with that. She right now designs for Free Spirit Fabric. She actually started out with Moda at the beginning of her career and has a style that is so distinct. you can spot a Tula bolt of fabric from across the shop. You could spot a Tula quilt from across the shop. And what I found was very interesting is the National Quilt Museum on their YouTube channel actually did a walking tour with Tula. It's in 6 different parts. I highly, highly recommend go checking it out. That is on the National Quilt Museum's YouTube page, and we can link to it in the description here, where Tula is talking about all of these quilts. It is fascinating and so entertaining. So this is the Tula. Let me get to the next page and I can tell you the quilts that I picked. This one is called Rattled. And what I think is so interesting and fascinating about this quilt is it's completely improv. I'll show you in just a second, kind of the general sketch, the design that Tula worked out of this, but the rest of it is improv. So the idea was there, but the specific, I guess, segments of the snake, the belly of the snake, all of those are improv sewn. And other than that, like there were a few pieces, like in this is kind of the interesting part of this story is if you look at the snakes have ears. Generally speaking, snakes don't have ears, but we've got ears on this. So like the size of the half square triangle there was worked out, but the rest of it was not. And we'll show you the design. The other thing that I was taken by is that there, with just about every single one of the quilts, and this applied to Tula and some of the other artists in the National Quilt Museum, is that you see the sketches of where this came from. Now, it's probably not the first sketch, it might be the final sketch, but you get to see the artistry that goes in there. And boy, Tula is a very good artist. If you just look at generally the things, it all starts on paper. And yes, it is digitized in order to make the fabric after the fact there, but it all starts out with a pencil and graph paper, which is the other lesson of this. You want to be a good artist? Get some graph paper. I think that's the key to it. That we saw graph paper with drawings on it all across the National Quilt Museum. And so it was just kind of interesting to see where these things begin. The next quilt that stopped me dead in my tracks was another Tula one, and this one is called Color Study Number 13. And this one has kind of a fun story with it, in that this quilt was designed by Tula Pink and Tula's sister. And when you're looking at the quilt here, trust me, it was a lot more square than this. My photographing leaves a little bit to be desired. But when you're looking at this, how it worked was Tula would pick out one combination of the ring, like the inner ring, let's say, and her sister would pick out the color combination of the next ring. And then Tula would pick one, and then her sister would pick one, and so on and so forth. And what is so interesting about this is quilts, and we could even extend this to just things in general, right? Things that are designed in collaboration are generally so much stronger than anything designed by one single person. And so we can look at a couple more of these pictures, but I was just kind of struck by that this quilt was a group effort, basically, between Tula and her sister. And here we were talking about designs and artistry. This was the original sketch for this quilt. And look at that. Another example of the quilting is just fantastic in this. I especially love on the right-hand side, the little raccoon, where the quilting just kind of made that apple core pop. And Molly, I could not agree with you more. You can spot a neon Tula. You can spot a Tula color, I would even argue, from absolutely a mile away, from space maybe even. One of the other little bits that I will take from the National Quilt Museum Walk with Tula YouTube series is that everything is 10% cooler when it's about space or when it has to do with space. So if you want to find out what she's talking about, be sure to check out that series. I cannot recommend it enough. It was very interesting. So just a reminder, if you want to see Tula Pink at the National Quilt Museum, This exhibit closes on September 15th, so don't wait too long. Now, another section that I was kind of surprised at, and I guess I wasn't surprised, but really just so many beautiful things to look at. And that is Janet Stone's section. Janet Stone's section was called Now I Know My ABCs, and I think in a minute you'll understand why. This segment or this display will be there at the National Quilt Museum through September 22nd, 2026. So if you're going before then, you'll see it. Now, Janet Stone started quilting really seriously in 2006, and by 2008, she'd already decided her life's work. And that would be that she would do a series of 26 quilts. So there's 26 letters in the alphabet. Her love of letter forms goes back to childhood. And you can tell when you look at some of these quilts that she got her start in cross stitching. They look a little sampler like. They reminisce, I guess they nod to cross stitch samplers. And her mom worked in the printing business and would bring home typeface catalogs. And each one of these quilts has quilting, piecing, has little buttons and doodads and all kinds of accessories that really harken back to those typeface letters. And one of the things that Janet was so interested in was how many different ways one letter could be designed. And so, in 16 years of her quilting career, she finished the 26th and final quilt in 2024. And so, at the National Quilt Museum is the first time that all of the 26 quilts have been displayed together. So, it really is just fascinating. And when I show you these quilts, you will understand that she's got some serious hardware, serious medals and honors based on these quilts. All of them were just so gorgeous, uh, absolutely beautiful. Now, let's talk about the ones that stopped me in my tracks. And in this case, it is going to be number 26, the final quilt in Janet's series. And this one it's called number 26, and it's got a subtitle of Blooming Blocks and One from the Flock. And so each of these blocks in the quilt, it takes both the letter of the alphabet and it identifies a flower and a traditional, generally kind of a starry quilt block that starts with that letter. And so I'm only going to point out one of these, and that is the letter Z, because why wouldn't we want to start with the letter Z? And you can see right in the middle there, she's got the one from the flock, which I do believe is kind of a nod to her husband, who actually sadly passed away while she was finishing this quilt. But if we go to Z, you can see an example of one of the quilt blocks. We've got the letter Z in the middle here. And of course, the flower would be zinnia. Why wouldn't it? But she couldn't think of a block, a traditional block that started with a Z. So she took a zigzag tile and then just added a star in the middle and made up her own block, which is basically the zigzag tile with star, is what she's calling it. Now, probably just as interesting as the front of this quilt is the back of this quilt. And you better believe I took some pictures of that. So on the left-hand side, you can just see an overall view of the back. And on the right, you can see it much more close up, where the quilting on the back is really just as important and interesting and beautiful as the quilting on the front. And there were a number of her quilts that were like this, where the back was just as lovely as the front. Janet, more than any other designer in the National Quilt Museum, had a lot of quilts hanging away from the wall so that you could actually see the back. They don't let you touch the quilts for very good and obvious reasons, but for the ones that it's really important, they make sure that you can see what's going on in the back. So that is Janet Stone, really beautiful. The other designer that is on display is Paula Nadelstern. And if you aren't familiar with Paula, you might be after you look through some of these quilts. So Paula, I'm imagining this is how this happened, but I could just be making this up. So she took one look at a kaleidoscope, the image you get when looking through a kaleidoscope, and decided that quilting needed to be more mathematically unhinged, but in the best way possible. So Paula was born in 1951, and she still lives on the same block in the Bronx where she grew up. So it's just really kind of interesting that someone whose whole artistic identity is built around infinite reflection and pattern, and if you think of like snowflakes and just these symmetrical circles of things, that she still lives where she grew up. Now, I think the official name for what this is bilateral symmetry, and all my math people in the comments will have to let me know if but it's basically just an optical trick. So if you think of a kaleidoscope and how the different images tessellate and dance together, that is what she's doing with fabric and quilting and piecing. So the story goes that her approach to quilting was sparked by a bolt of Liberty of London fabric that revealed kind of a symmetry she couldn't stop chasing. And all of her quilts have this feel, although you can definitely see an evolution of where she started from and where she's designing now. So I guess more recently, Paula has designed more than 30 fabric collections for Benartex. She's written a number of books, I think it's 6 now. And in 2009, she became the first contemporary quilt artist ever given a solo exhibition at the American Folk Art Museum in New York. And we've got Raquella saying another ooh for Paula. And girl, you haven't even seen the quilts yet. I'm sure you have seen some, but these ones that are on display are so fantastic. So if you haven't heard of Paula, if you haven't seen her quilts before, you could really think of her as quilting's answer to a mathematician who also happens to have incredible taste in color. Her quilts are very math forward. So if you've ever made like what am I thinking of? A one block wonder or a kaleidoscope quilt, you thought that's good enough, that's hard enough. Her work here will absolutely recalibrate what you think is possible with fabric and with the technique. So let's get into it. These are Paula's quilts. So we've got kaleidoscopic 22. I got to practice my Roman numerals here. This is also called ice crystals. Now, the reason I wanted to show you this one is it's one of the earliest, not the earliest, but one of the earlier quilts by Paula that was on display here. This one was finished in 2000. And I am sure if I tell you what this is based on, I'm sure you can kind of picture the image here. They are the photo micrographs made by W.A. Bentley in the late 1800s. So kind of those old pictures of snowflakes. And they were eventually published by the American Meteorological Society. Boy, that's a tough word. American Meteorological Society in 1931. But they were these really close-up pictures of snowflakes that were taken back in the 1800s. And so you can definitely see that in the quilts here. We've got a closer up picture of just one of those snowflakes. Now, this is the one that was down in the lower right hand, and just the design is so beautiful. Now, what I found very interesting about this is I had not noticed it. So it's an occupational hazard to occasionally, when you're looking at quilts, to see if I could figure out what kind of fabric is in it. Like, oh, do we have that at the shop? Am I familiar? Is this a new kind of fabric? Like, what's going on? What fabric are people using to make these amazing, beautiful quilts? And the reason I wanted to show this and talked about it with the friend who I actually went to on the road trip with, is that she said that she has this fabric at home. And I said, oh, well, you could do that too. You could make it just as beautiful. And she said no. But it's always, like I say, it's always kind of fun and interesting to see what kind of fabric people are using. Like I said, a little bit of an occupational hazard. And the next one is beautiful as well. This is kaleidoscopic 8, VII. Yep, 8. The sun, the moon, dot, 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 and the stars. And so this one actually truly is one of Paula's earliest quilts that was in the collection. This one was finished in 1991. And there's two pieces that stop me on this one. One of which is the creativity and the combining of, I'll call it traditional quilt blocks, and that you can see this is kind of a wonky sawtooth star here. The traditional with the more experimental, so the sun and the moon are more experimental, and the stars here are a little bit outside of the norm, but they're definitely very recognizable as a sawtooth star block. The other piece of this is it was in this quilt that Paula kind of, I would say, perfected approximating. Oops, I'll go back to this one before I finish that sentence, but approximating curved lines without actually sewing curves. And it's a little bit hard to see in this particular quilt, so I'm going to show you another quilt. This is called Kaleidoscopic 37. And you can see the whole picture down in the lower left here. And I've zoomed in quite a bit so you can see some of those curved areas. So this is going to be the curve right around the right-hand side where there's no curves here, but these are just, she approximated curved lines by just sewing little tiny slivers of fabric onto where she wanted to get that curve effect, to get a curve without actually having to make a curve. So that is super fantastic. Now, Paula's exhibit in the National Quilt Museum runs through the end of the year, through December 30th of 2026. So you've got a little bit longer to see this one and catch it. Now, I started the show by saying what quilter follows the rules, and I am no different. I don't follow the rules. So while I said I will give you 7 quilts that stop me in my tracks, I'm going to give you a couple more. We're going to go through these pretty quick. It's going to be a lightning round. So, and I will get my head out of the way so that you can see these holes, since we're going to go through them so fast. This is another one by Janet Stone. This is number 16, the A-E-I-O-U's. And you can see the little the vowels in the corner of that center square there are the sheeps with the there. The reason I wanted to point this one out is a couple fold. One, in this particular quilt, I had to show you the quilting. Now, this was called out in the little plaque that was talking about this quilt, but you can see all of the quilting on the right-hand side. It does not overlap with the dots, the polka dots in the fabric. All of those kind of red-orange quilting lines, not a single one of them crosses over a polka dot. Can you even imagine that? The quilting on all of these, but this one specifically, is banana pants, absolutely banana pants. The other piece I wanted to call out here is her use of dyed fabrics. This quilt was built all around hand-dyed fabrics that was done by a friend of hers, and you could see just that beautiful variation of color in the upside-down sheep, the eye here, of the beautiful reds into the oranges, and you can only get that with a hand-dyed fabric. It was just a beautiful quilt all around. This one is Little Bits by Tula. I'm sure you've seen the images of this quilt on social media. It's a more contemporary quilt from 2025, but this one I just had to point out because of all of the little bits that you just can't possibly pick up on an image on social media. You can see that M here with the chunked out section here. Absolutely fantastic. The artistry is, something to be aspired to. And then all the little bits here, we've got a hat on the left-hand side, a little purple chocolate covered strawberry in the center, and then we've got bees and swimsuits on the other side. Those are all foundation paper pieced, and they are tiny, probably about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches, depending on the image here, but it just creates so much interest. And that's the fabulous thing about what we do, isn't it? Is that when you're standing far away, you get one view of the quilt, one image of the quilt. When you're standing a little bit closer, you get another one. And when you're standing very close, you get to see all of these little intricacies. Sometimes the intricacies are made with the fabric. You get to see the print of the fabric and it looks completely different. And sometimes you get teeny tiny little foundation paper pieced little nuggets that just are fantastic and beautiful. Here's another one that very much looks different depending on how far away you're standing. This is Pixel Bird by Tula Pink, another one from 2025. And from far away, you get this great kind of pixelated view. And then when you go a little bit closer, you get to see all the interesting bits. What struck me by this one is that of course, this is Tula, and of course, she's never going to just use plain solids. There are some plain solids in there, but even in the grays, for example, you've got little star prints. In the some of the background, you've got these flecks of these neon colors. Because if you can use something that is bright and fun and beautiful, why wouldn't you? Yeah, you just can't go to normal gray after this. And now these next two quilts, I will say were overheard the most debate and discussion about these. Now, this is Summer Fun by a Brazilian artist, Marina Landi, and this was finished in 2021. And you've got the whole quilt over on the right, and then just a close-up version of this. Now, this was made using a collage quilting technique. So we've got fabric on the top, fused down, and then quilted over quite densely. And the quilting really follows the contour of the quilt. It just adds such amazing depth and texture to what is essentially fabric on fabric. Now, the lovely thing about this one is that, or actually, maybe we'll say the contested thing about this one is that there is some painting on this. So, like, are we maybe getting into art quilt territory where you've got not only just fabric, but you've got some kind of coloring, whether it's paint or colored pencils or things like that, to add a little bit of texture and depth. You can see on the whole picture of the quilt that's over on the left-hand side, some of those darker areas, that's exactly what that was. It was like a paint or a coloring of some sort, not just fabric. And then this one is And Our Flag Was Still There by Melinda Beulah from 2011. And so this one is definitely a collage quilting. I wanted to point this out for all of my Stitch Lab friends in that this is, I think, the best example that was at the Quilt Museum of thread painting, where you're using thread to color your fabric a little bit, to denote wind or movement. You're using thread as an element, and really very dense quilting. But you can see this is a generally raw edge applique on this, and then using this very, very dense quilting to hold it down. And so another example of when you look at it from far away, you get that beautiful image of our flag. And then on the right-hand side, where you can see kind of the inner workings of how it was put together, all the different colors of thread, the swirls. What was kind of funny about this one is when I was looking at this, the one of the docents, I guess I would call them a docent at the Quilt Museum, came over and said, yeah, you know it must be like really quilted by a human, because she didn't say mistakes, but all the imperfections. And I thought, boy, that was kind of an interesting way to put that. But I guess that is how you know it's real. Now, the hotly debated item for those two last quilts was, some folks were debating whether collage style quilting, or where you're taking fabric and putting it on other fabric, really counts as quilting. And the argument was that it's not real quilt making the way traditional patchwork is. And I just wanted to bring that up to talk about it. Now, I happen to be of the opinion that quilting has never been just one thing. It has always evolved, and it will continue to evolve. It started as whole cloth, to patchwork, to applique, to art quilts, to collage. The techniques change, But the through line is always the same. Like there are certain components that make a quilt a quilt. It is layers of fabric put together with intention and desire to make something that didn't exist before. And so we aren't gatekeepers here. We don't decide what counts or doesn't count to protect the craft. Now, it is for people with, I guess, a lot more experience and desire than me to judge quilts and say this belongs or this does not. But to me, quilting doesn't just tell people they don't belong in the craft. Go find something else. I feel like if someone spent hours cutting and arranging and fusing and stitching and yeah, maybe even coloring fabric into a piece that moves you, that makes you feel something, that's quilting. Full stop. End of story. But I'd always love to hear what your thoughts on it are. Are there places that quilts like that belong? Are there places that they don't? Are you a big fan, or are you a collage quilter or an art quilt maker? What do you like to do? What do you think about that? So that brings us to the end of the 7 plus quilts that stopped me absolutely dead in my tracks. Now, I wanted to give a special shout out to all of the quilt shops that we stopped at the way, because we couldn't plan a quilt museum road trip without also stopping at, okay, sit down, guys. We stopped at 12 different quilt shops over the weekend. It was a blast, and I wouldn't change anything about it. And so I wanted to give a special shout out to some of the amazing quilts that we went to, that we stopped at. So I have a special award. Now, the award, there's no cash or prizes in this. You just get a million super cool points for all of these shops. And so we thank them for being around. And just one quick reminder, actually, I will go back to the other page. One quick reminder is, if you want to give some love on and support your local quilt shop, if you've got something great and lovely and fabulous to say, tell the world. Put it out on social media, put it out on their Google page so that other people know and can find them, because it is the best love and support that you can give to your local quilt shop. So, in that same spirit, here are the honorifics for the quilt shops that we visited. So, we first, now this is going to be mostly in the Midwest, from the drive from Minneapolis down to Paducah, Kentucky. So, hopefully that wherever you are in the world, you've got some quilt shops that are just like this that you could give them awards and prizes to as well. And this was Inspired to Sew, and they have won the Look Up Award. In this particular shop, if you make it to Inspired to Sew, it was a fabulous shop, lots of great things to look at. They had a little bit of something for everyone, a great selection of batiks. They had some Tilda in there. They had lots of Tula. They had lots of cuddle as well, in many different kinds and textures. There's a ton to see on the walls that you are going to miss if you are only looking at the bolts and the shelves. So this particular shop in Cedar Rapids, Iowa won the Look Up Award, because if you go there, make sure that you look up. And I love this. Molly will try anything if it involves thread and fabric. I love a fellow quilter with the "how hard can it be" gene. So, Molly, that is fantastic. Keep it up. And we have the Blue Sky Quilt Shop in LeClaire, Iowa, and they won the Biggest Heart Award. So this was a kind of a smaller shop in a really cute place on some water. They had lots of more modern, fun things, lots of kits, lots of needlepoint and embroidery and things like that, as well as all your traditional quilting items. And they won the Biggest Heart Award because they had a big section in the back. Now, I will say that when you are a retail store, every single square foot is money. And I know that's kind of gauche to say, but Rent costs money, right? All of this stuff costs money. And so they had a whole big section of their store dedicated to Project Linus, where people would bring things in to donate things they aren't using anymore, patterns and notions and things like that. And if you want any of those things, you just put a little donation in the Project Linus jar, and then they give that money to Project Linus. So this one is absolutely fabulous, and Blue Sky Quilting, the Biggest Heart Award. We also visited Betty's Thimble in Orion, Illinois, and this store won the Blender MVP award. They had a beautiful selection of of solids, of blenders, of batiks, of anything you need to go with the thing that you're shopping for. So if you are hunting for something to go with the fabric that you already own, or if you're hunting for something that's a little more like, not everything needs to be a Diana Ross, right? And so their store had the Diana Rosses, it had the main collections, but it also had all of the Supremes to go with it. So that's my analogy for the day. I think I'll probably give up on coming up with analogies, but I stand behind it. This one is the Calico Country Sew in and Vac. And no, there were two locations of this one. This one was in Carbondale, Illinois, and then there was another branch in Paducah, Kentucky. This one had the most sewing machines per square foot. Lots of personality, lots of sewing machines. They were perfectly friendly and absolutely lovely. I also found some really great finds there and that I was looking for, decided on this road trip I was going to find fabric with food. Because it's not something we don't have a ton of novelty fabric here at Gotham. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to check out, have something that I was hunting for, and it was fabric with food. And I found some good stuff there. I found some bananas, which I hadn't seen anywhere else, which was lovely. We have next up, we've got Pinecone Gallery and Studios in Paducah. So now we made it to Paducah. They have the coolest claim to fame, and that's the award that they've won. The Pinecone Gallery Studios is a little bit, it's part fabric store, very specific fabric store, and part art gallery. And so it was just a cool little find. The coolest claim to fame here is that this is one of only 6 shops in the entire world that carries all of the colors of cherrywood fabric, along with any of the specialty bundles. This year, so if you're not familiar with cherrywood fabric, cherrywood is actually a company that started in Brainerd, Minnesota. So it's just about maybe 2 hours north of where I am right now. So I went all the way to Kentucky to buy some cherrywood fabric that was made in Minnesota, which was kind of funny. In any event, they hand dye, Cherrywood hand dyes all of their fabric. So if you remember the Janet Stone quilt with the sheep and that beautiful hand dyed fabric, Cherrywood is another brand that does that, and they do it really well. So this is truly a rare distinction to be one of only 6 shops in the entire world that carries this. And the newest, they have contests each year where everybody designs using a certain palette, and then they display these quilts, and that travels across the country. And this year's contest, or this year's challenge, is Jane Goodall. It's inspired by Jane Goodall, so you can kind of imagine what the colors are. It's kind of a like a sagey green, very jungly green, along with a khaki, and there was a darker color in there. So they've got all of the bundles, including the challenge ones. The other thing that you really want to go visit this studio for is they also have all of the books of the past challenges and the quilts that were made that were entered. So great quilt to spend, or great shop to spend a little bit of time in. We've got Hancock's of Paducah. Now, this one is probably a name that you've heard before for very good reason. Hancock's of Paducah, they are so big, they need a map. And so that was the picture that I chose for them, is the map of the store. They've got the fastest fabric turnover award. And things move fast here at Hancock's of Paducah. So if you see it, make sure you grab it. They've got lots of collections across just about every manufacturer, and they have a huge area in the back that's all pre-cut. So I'd highly recommend to go start in the pre-cut area, and then you can find the fabric that goes along with it at the front. But it is fantastic. And they've displayed at the Festival of Quilts in the UK. So I think that maybe that's the next place to go, is to just cross the country or across the world looking for great fabric displays or great quilt displays. And the other thing I learned about Hancock's, it is not the same as the Hancock fabric I remember from a kid. They are completely separate. Muppin's Sewing Emporium, also in Paducah, has the Best Vibe Award. The owner was very stylish, super friendly, kind of a rock and roll meets quilting heart energy that was unlike anywhere else on this trip. They had mini bolts of fabric, really unique things, samples of lots of things, and very creative and unique designs, project designs. So there were some kind of like a rug wreath. If you think of it like a jelly roll rug, they had some really cute table runners using very unique techniques. So just a little bit outside of that beaten path of quilting, the best vibe forever. And I got the coolest shirt that I cannot wait to wear from Muppin's Sewing Emporium. So they win the Best Vibe Award. The very best specialty shop award goes to Paper Pieces in Paducah. And these guys also win the Went the Extra Mile award. They were absolutely fantastic. The pop-up shop hours are, I would say, very limited, usually about 10 to 2, 10 to 3, depending on the day. So definitely check that out before you go. But it just so happened that they were going to be open on a Saturday. We were there on a Saturday, and they let us come in and shop. The owner, was fantastic. This is a very specialty shop for English paper piecing. Whether you are starting out or whether you are on your way, they're going to have what you need there at this pop-up shop. It was fantastic. And it was like really fun, good energy shop. So that is why they win the very best specialty shop. And let's see here. This was where I finally remembered to take out my camera and I got a picture. The other award is for, it's kind of bizarre and slightly embarrassing, but I absolutely am obsessed with like big art that's out in places. I love big art. And so right next to Paper Pieces is the world's largest sewing needle. Now, I don't think it actually has or will sew anything, but here's a picture of the world's largest sewing needle. It was really fun to see and just get a picture with there. And I was glad that I finally remembered to take a picture of something, and it just happened to be this. And the next award, the cutest overall, or the overall cutest, goes to Prairie Quilt Studio in Urbana, Iowa. Now, this was one of the last stops that we made. This is just cute. Their store is cute. Their premise is cute. Their fabrics are a little more modern. Like if you think of Tula and Ruby Star, they've got a little bit of Lori Holt. It was just, all of it was cute and lovely. They had tons of samples, tons of great kits. I actually picked up a couple on the way back. Just one of the most lovely, adorable shops in the whole trip. They had their collections grouped together really nicely, so it was really very a thoughtful presentation. And bonus award is the most relaxing bathroom. They had a giant bathroom with lounge chairs, and I don't think I've ever seen that before, and I probably won't ever see it again. So they won the award for that. Now, one shop that I feel horrible about because I just noticed that I didn't have this slide for, but I do want to give them a shout out, is the Feed Mill Quilt Shop. And this was a absolute blast to go to. Now, the Feed Mill Quilt Shop is fantastic. They had everything. This award that they won is the best shop to get happily lost in. So if you are going to the Feed Mill Quilt Shop, make sure you plan a little bit of time, and make sure you have plenty of time to walk around. They had pre-cuts galore, layer cakes, jelly rolls, charm packs. It was absolutely just almost overwhelming. And this is in Oneida, Illinois, kind of like there's actually another stop. Betty's Thimble was very close to this one. And so just a good time all around. They were so very lovely. We got there just a little bit before closing and didn't realize that we needed so much more time to shop. And so the owner stuck around and was just very lovely. And it was the greatest treasure hunt I've been on in a very long time. Oh, and Molly lives in a quilt shop desert. I'm so sorry to hear that. But yes, it sometimes is overwhelming with how many choices we have. But hopefully you can live a little bit vicariously through us. And I'm happy to share kind of all of the adventures. And maybe this is just a perfect excuse to go on another quilt shop hop. And we'll share, Molly. We'll bond over that. So the last thing I'm going to leave you with is a little tease. So, like I said, if you have any questions about Paducah, like, it was an amazing trip. It was a fabulous time. I would 100% go again when the next exhibits are laid out there. The one thing I did want to tell you about is the next exhibits. So we talked about the ones that are there and when they're leaving. The next one's coming up is Pigment, Dye, and Thread, and that's going to start September 18th of 2026 all the way through March 2nd of 2027. And then this one I'm going to butcher. It is Carrefour European du Patchwork Avant-Garde. That is going to be September 25th through December 1st of 2026. And then after that, they'll announce the next one. So that is our trip. We're calling it Peace Out, Paducah. If you have been to the National Quilt Museum or any of these shops or your favorite shop, put it in the comments. Also, if this trip is on your bucket list, definitely consider going. The last thing I'm going to leave you with is a little backwards. We just got this right before the show. The UPS guy dropped it off. This is the new novel Stitched by Eli McCann. Now, Eli McCann is kind of big on TikTok. He's very funny, just kind of like a dry funny. And this is the book that he wrote using his mom and his mom's experience in a quilting guild as like inspiration. It's definitely fiction, but really very wry and funny. The people who have, they put the little blurbs on the back. I'll read you this one. 1 part Schitt's Creek, 1 part Golden Girls, and a whole lot of Eli McCann's signature wit and charm. So I cannot wait to crack this open. We will have it available for sale on the website. So check out, if you're not subscribed to our email, that's probably going to be the first place that you will note when it's available, or we'll bring it up on next week. So speaking of, I really hope to see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. That's going to be Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. I hope to see you then, if not before, and I really hope before.